Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our series on the patriarchs with with Abraham. Last time we looked at the call of Abraham, how that call required four things of Abraham for him to be given the for him to be for him to be get the promise of the call. Particularly, Caleb, his father's kindred, as far as extended family, the land of his nativity, the Chaldeans, his father's household, and he had to go into the land that God would show him, a land he had never been to. And we looked at when Lot separated from him, he finally met all those conditions. And then then the Lord told him, "Okay, I'm giving you the land of Canaan now. You met the conditions," and told him to walk it. Abraham was walk the length, the breadth of it, and how Abraham was in good condition. Things went well as long as he stayed in the land, as long as he stayed in the area of his calling. When we got outside of his calling by going to Egypt, when things didn't look well, he got in trouble and things went well again when he got back into his calling. And we also looked at Lot. How Lot, when they separate, Lot chose what looked good to his eyes, but how it turned out to be bad in many ways. Now today we're continuing on with Abraham, and we're looking at the seed of Abraham. And this seed is very very relevant to where we are right now today. It has everything to do with that with this war that's going on between Israel and Hamas over in Gaza. Because at the root of this war and a lot of conflicts between Jews, using the term very broadly, not meaning just from the tribe of Judah or from the former kingdom of Judah, but meaning all the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's been conflicts between them, Arabs, and primarily through Islam, 600 AD, but before that, who also claimed to be the seed of Abraham. Christians, again, using the term very broadly, many of them are not Christian in a biblical sense, but they still nonetheless will call themselves Christians, and they say that they have these rights, because they are the seed of Abraham. So this thing about being the seed of Abraham has caused a lot of conflict over the centuries and even up to these modern times. And so we're going to look now and see what the book of truth, the Bible, has to say about the seed of Abraham, and just see who is the seed of Abraham, and in what regards in what benefits are accorded them for being the seed. We're going to begin here in Genesis 15, verses 1 through 6. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. I am your exceeding great reward." And Abram said, "Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is Eliezer of Damascus?" And Abram said, "Behold, to me you have given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is my heir." And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, "This shall not be your heir, but he that shall come forth out of your own bowels shall be your heir." And he brought him forth abroad and said, "Look now toward heaven and tell the stars, if you be able to number them." He said to him, "So shall your seed be." And he believed the Lord, and he counted them to him for righteousness. Okay, now first thing I want you to notice is, it says the word of the Lord came to Abram and said something to him in a vision. So there's something about that. Remember, in 1 John, in the beginning was the word was with God, the word was God. And notice this word is a person. Okay, so is this is remember Abraham's Yeshua said Abraham knew that God that he knew Abram or Abraham. So this is Yeshua, the pre-manifest a pre-carnate before he took on flesh manifestation to Abraham, where he's coming to Abraham. And we'll see this happen several times here as we go along through if we look at today's lesson. Now, he told him not to fear. Usually when God sends him to tell you not to fear, it's because you had something that's coming along that's causing you to be in fear. And in Abram's case, what that was is this: that they had no children, and even though the steward of his house was born into his house, and he made him his heir, and he was kind of like a son to him. It really wasn't what I desired, and it caused him to have some fear, and that's what the Lord's addressing. And the Lord's telling him, "Don't be afraid." That he's not going to be. He's not. You're not going to leave it all to this one. You're going to leave it to someone's going to come out of your own body. And now notice this connection between his own body. We'd saw before. He'd mentioned before the sands of the sea, but now we're focused on the stars of heaven, and they're innumerable. The stars of heaven is going to be a seed. Is going to be his real. Is going to be a seed. And the stars of heaven are not of the earth; they're heavenly. It speaks of something not being natural, but rather supernatural. And how's that going to come about? Through faith. Abraham believes the Lord, and his account. See, notice here the Lord. He believed the Lord, and it's the word of the Lord. So that the word of the Lord that came to him was Messiah. And the Lord Messiah counted to him for righteousness. So he's going to get this seed by faith. And it's not this seed here, he's referring to it right here. It's not a natural seed. It's not an earthly seed, but a heavenly seed. But notice that that's one seed, but he also says there's going to be a seed that comes out of his own body. That's a natural seed. So there's two seeds right here, a two-part seed. Perhaps you could look at it that way. But there's more to it than that. And we'll see that in a moment here. Now we're going to go to Romans 4, verses 3 through 5, and look at the words of Shaul, the Apostle Paul. For what says the Scripture? Abraham believed God and is counted him for righteousness. Now him that works is the reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. But him that works not, but believes on him that justifies the ungodly, his faith is accounted for righteousness. Okay, notice this one didn't have, the only condition, if you want to call it a condition, was that Abraham had to believe God. But he didn't have to do anything else. He didn't have to, as we saw in the call, take action and move and separate himself from people and go to somewhere he didn't know and leave where he did know and so on and so forth. All that was required here was for Abraham to believe him. So, since he didn't do anything for God, God didn't owe him. This wasn't a matter of God giving something because he owed it to him, but his grace. So it's the same with us. If we believe on him that his grace, that we cannot somehow, that we don't get salvation by keeping by meeting some conditions, like, say, keeping every commandment of the Torah perfectly, but we believe God that He has justified us. Our faith is going to be justified, is going to be counted for righteousness, and that is counted for righteousness. So that's something that's owed us, or nothing we actually accomplished on our own. We haven't always. None of us, even Abraham, has not always done what's right in the eyes of God. but his faith is going to be a substitute for his failures. So he'll now be counted as if he had never done anything except what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Now in Galatians 3, verse 14 through 16, we can. Now the blessing of Abraham might come upon the Gentiles through Jesus Christ. When I see the promise of the Spirit through faith, wherein do I speak in the manner of men, though it be a man's covenant, yet be confirmed, no man disannuls, nor adds thereto. Now to Abraham to seed where the promise is made. And he says not to seeds as to many, but as of one, and to your seed, which is Christ. So again, Shaul is clearing up some mysteries for us here. So, and perhaps in some ways adding them as well. But we'll unravel the whole thing. Notice the Gentiles. Well, who are Gentiles? Gentiles are people not circumcised, who are not part of the household of Abraham, are not descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay. But they can also receive the same promise of the Spirit through faith, just as Abraham receives this promise of one coming out of his own body to be his heir to get the land that God's given it to him, is given to him. By of course by faith. So this, and now so the promise was made and the covenant's been made. And the only way to acquire this particular, if you want to call this promise here, a covenant, you could, is through faith. Okay. But the seed with a promise made. And this seed we looked at, there's a physical seed, one's could by your own body. There's a spiritual seed, the heavenlies, a natural, a supernatural. But there's also, the seed also speaks of Messiah, the singular seed, who didn't come out of Abraham's body directly. It came through a long chain, 42 generations later. Messiah comes through Mary, who's the descendant of Abraham, the seed of woman. So the seed of Abraham now has, if you want to look at that way, three parts: Messiah himself, a supernatural seed, and a natural seed. But we're not done yet. Who is that natural seed? And what benefit does each one get? Okay, the supernatural seed we saw gets the benefit of salvation, the benefit of being counted righteous and justified. But what about the natural seed? And let's continue on in Genesis 15, verse 7 through 12, and we'll start unraveling that about this natural seed. And he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought you out of the land of Chaldees, to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said, take me a heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took him all these, divided them in the midst, and laid them one piece against another, but the birds he divided not. When the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and a great horror of darkness fell upon him. Okay, so Abraham's asking, well, he's literally asking for a sign. He's asked for something so he can look back on and say, yeah, I'm certain because this happened. Now, here's the thing about these dividing these animals. This was common in perhaps a covenant of friendship where you went in league with someone and basically said, if I'm going to explain this covenant of friendship a little deeper. It involves this. both parties have to be willing to do what the other party would do for them. So if Abraham, he's called the friend of God, if Abraham will do this, then God has to at least match that. If God will do that, then Abraham also has to match it. Okay. And if they don't, the other party has a right to kill him, hence the cutting in half. You're okay. To cut them asunder. If they break their covenant, they betray that friendship. And typically, the parties would pass through the pieces themselves. We both pass between these two pieces. Now, the Lord hadn't showed up, and Abraham's out there, and this sleep is supernatural. It's a horror of great darkness fell, a deep sleep. And the only time I've seen this expression before so far is with Adam when God took a rib out of Adam and made a woman. So this is not just Abraham got tired and shut his eyes. This is like being slain in the spirit. He just goes out, has no control over it at all. And while he's in this deep sleep, here's what we're going to see what happens once he goes to this deep sleep here in Genesis. If we continue in Genesis 15, verses 13 through 17. And he said to Abraham, know for sure your seed shall be a stranger to the land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. Afterward they shall come out with a great substance. And you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And it came to pass when the sun was down, it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. Okay, so while Abram's in this deep sleep, he had a vision to start with, so saw the Lord in a vision and told him to do something. He went and did it. Now he's in this deep sleep, and he's given some more instruction, really prophecy. Abram is called a prophet. And here's why. I mean, he's the Lord has showed him what's to come. Because all prophets really are just passing on what the God told them. They're a seer. They see a vision from God. He tells something, and they pass that on. And this is what's going on here. Now, the land it's not, they're stranger to the land it's not theirs, and serve them shall afflict them 400 years. It's really, you should read it this way, be a little bit more accurate. The stranger to the land and they shall serve them and afflict them 400 years. The 400 years total for those two things. Because his seed's going to be Abram is in a land that's not his own, not his right now. He doesn't own it. And so will the seed when they're born. And we'll look at where this 400 years starts in another lesson exactly. And we'll show it was not 400 years in Egypt as people commonly think. But it's 400 years total of being in the land of Canaan from a certain event forward to the Exodus. And we'll discuss that event. We'll discuss that event in a future lesson, and pin this down for you. But that nation is Egypt. So they're going to come out, and those are going to come out in the fourth generation. The fourth generation, from when they went in. And again, we're not going to look at that in detail today, but we will look at it in some lesson for certain in the future. Lord willing, we'll show this. Now, the vision's over, and Abram's up, and he wants to, and notice the smoking furnace and burning lamp that passed between those pieces. This again is a pre-incarnate manifestation of Messiah. He's passing through the pieces. That burning lamp, and that lamp reminds us what? The burning bush, right? That's the smoking furnace, that the smoke that's in heaven that pours out from the throne of God that's mentioned in like Revelation. Okay, so notice Messiah himself, God through Messiah is now entered into this covenant with Abraham by going between the pieces. Abraham had already done it. Contrary to what people might think, it already went through him when he was out there driving the birds off and everything. Okay, but he was waiting for God to go through him as well, which he did. So now they're there, and again, and notice again that there's no condition right here other than what Abraham's already done, but there was that condition. He had to do what he said. He wanted a sign. He gave him one, and he got the sign, and his seed's going to come to him. Now, this promise has nothing to do with the land or anything else, just that a seed is going to come from his own body. If we look there and we go back here, that's what we see. Or if we went back previously, that's what we'd see, okay? It has nothing to do with the land at all. It's a promise of a seed, an heir to come out of his own body. Okay, now we continue on about this promise here in Genesis 15, verses 18 through 21. In the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, "Unto your seed I've given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaims and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Girgasites and the Jebusites." Okay, so now unto his seed he's given this land. Again, no specification of a seed except the seed it's out of his own body. And notice the boundaries of this. And we talked about this recently when we was looking at the fall holidays about the restoration of Israel. How they're going to get this. In that area, notice, it goes all the way up north, just a little south of Damascus, kind of draw a straight line, kind of a straight line from the Mediterranean Sea going east to west over to the Euphrates River, went to the border of Haran, or Haran, as your translation probably says, and which is just across the Euphrates. So it went to the Euphrates River, and then on the south goes to the river of Egypt. And it's about the Nile breaks into seven small streams to make seven smaller rivers to form the Nile Delta. It's on the east, so it's on the east bank of those seven streams. The one that's closest to Israel today, it's furthest east. On the east bank of that is the border. Okay, so it's including part of what's Egypt today. It would include the entire Sinai Peninsula, most of what's Lebanon today, most of all of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza Strip, some of what's Syria today, a good chunk of Syria, a good part of Syria, and about half the country of Iraq, the half that's on the west side of the Euphrates River. And that's this area, and would include, even if we went straight across there from this river like we're talking about, down from a lot, the southern end of Israel today, which you kind of do a straight line. It would also include parts of what Saudi Arabia of Saudi Arabia today as well. So this is a much bigger territory than the original land of Canaan. Notice it includes the Amorites who lived on the Canaanites who lived, primarily on the east side of the west side of the Jordan River. The Amorites lived on the west side, the east side. And these various groups who are outside the land of the Canaanites, that's why their Canaanites are listed out separately. But he's given them all this land, not just the land of the Canaanites, to his seed. And his seed has been fighting over, and there's been fights over this land ever since, because different groups, these groups I mentioned earlier, claim to be a seed, claim that land is theirs. And that's, and really that's a manifestation of this fight today with Hamas and Israel. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, except, and replace it with a, they say Palestinian today, but really a lot of them, they have this claim to Arabs, but basically they're claiming that they're the seed of Abraham and should be there, not the Jews. and we'll just there's another group that's done the same thing in the past. We'll talk about them towards the end. But this is that large area that this really it's only about the size of South Dakota, but it's big enough to be able to fight over it. Now we're going to continue on extensively fight over it. We're continue on Genesis 16 verses 1 through 5, and we're going to start seeing how how this promise is going to be fulfilled, and why this confusion over who the seed of Abraham is, this natural seed. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children. She had a handmaid, an Egyptian's name was Hagar. And Sarah said unto Abram, behold, now the Lord has restrained me from bearing. I pray you, go into my maid, and it may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said unto Abram, my wrong be upon you. I have given my maid into your bosom. And when she saw that she conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord's judge between me and you. Okay, now remember, last we saw Sarai was barren. God's made this promise that a child is going to come. Abram is going to father a child from his own body, and Sarai knows the impossibility of this. This is not possible with her. It's not looking good for her. She's never been able to have children. So she comes up with this plan to have her maid do this. So notice Abraham to be his wife. Hagar, if you prefer, is now his wife. She was a slave, but now she's got a bump in status. But she's a bondswoman. She really has no say in whether or not she wants to be Abram's wife. She's not got the same status as Sarah, who was free. But she's his wife nonetheless. And because of that, Abram, this is not something for Abram just to casually have sex with. She's there for a purpose, this wife thing, and that is to raise up a child. They give Abraham a child, and she does become pregnant right away. 10 years, these 10 years have gone by now, but when she does, she's not treating Sarai the way she did before. Her mistress is spies in her eyes. She's like, first of all, she maybe didn't want to marry. She didn't want to go this with Abram. Who knows? Maybe there was she's obviously a much younger woman. Agar means built. Very attractive, perhaps a very attractive young woman. And perhaps there was some man in the camp she wanted to marry instead, some younger man. But now, this, being the way things are, that's never going to happen for her. And she's pregnant where Sarah couldn't be. So she's got this thing going on where, look, I did what you couldn't do, and she just, and like, I'm carrying Abram's son, you're not. I don't have to do what you tell. I don't have to go around doing what you tell me anymore. She might obey, or she may still do what she says, but she's got a very different attitude about it, and just pushes back and be like, oh, I can't, I'm pregnant, remember, kind of thing. So she's kind of making Sarai miserable. And notice Sarai blames Abram for this. And I've had men say that sounds just like a woman. Tells her husband she wants and Sarai, by the way, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in more detail in a minute. But her name means contentious. And we don't know if Hagar means built, it's very attractive, has a very attractive build to her body. We don't know if Abram, when Sarai said, "Go into my handmaiden and marry her, and raise up a seed on my and have and raise, and that notice I may obtain her children by her. That child was going to be counted. Sarai is going to be like, oh, that's my child, even though she is the one that actually carried it. This woman, as far as she's concerned, is doing a service for her, no different than cleaning, no different than cleaning the dishes. Okay, so if Sarai and Abram went, I'll get right on that, honey. Or, as her name suggests more, she nagged him day after day. Whichever way, she wasn't happy. And Abram was just going to do this to make his wife happy. It's kind of implied by the names here. And he does want a son. And God didn't specify who the mother was earlier, just said out of his body. So, Abram goes along with it. And when it goes south, she blames Abram. And notice the Lord judged between you and me. Why she say that? Because it was Abram was the man. Abram had the responsibility to tell her no and stick with it and man up, and he didn't. So he has, it's up to him to say no and stick with it, and even tell her, I don't want to hear you talk about this anymore. But he didn't do it. So it's his responsibility. So he is responsible for this, even though it was her idea, even though she nagged him. Sorry, man, but that's the way it is. Quit, it's time for you to man up and don't wimp out like Abram did. Now, in Genesis 16, verses 6 through 11, we read the following as we continue on with this. But Abram said to Sarai, behold, your maid is in your hand. Do with her as it pleases you. And when Sarah dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. And the angel of the Lord found her by the fountain of water in the waters, by the fountain in the way of Shur. And Hagar, Sarah's maid, and he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, whence came you? And where will you go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord said, return to your mistress, and make yourself under her hands. And the angel of the Lord said, I'll multiply your seed exceedingly, that shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are with child and shall bear a son, shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. Okay, well, Ishmael means the Lord hears. Now, Sarai is now treating her harshly. She probably didn't beat her because she don't want to risk anything to this child. This child, she still wants Abraham to have a child, but she just, makes her life miserable. And Hagar runs away. Now, Shur, remember, she's an Egyptian. Shur, we're told, is on the border, towards the border of Egypt, from the land of Canaan. So she's on her way back to where she came from. Abram had went to Egypt, and he picked her up there, apparently. But she doesn't know where she's going. She didn't really have any plan except get away from Sarah and get down to Egypt. Now, notice this angel of the Lord said unto her. Now, notice what the angel of the Lord's not saying, thus says the Lord, blah, blah, blah. The angel of the Lord's interacting with her himself. This is the Melech Adonai in Hebrew. Again, a pre-manifestation of Messiah, a pre-incarnate manifestation, I should say, of Messiah. And we'll show this in a moment, okay? And first of all, notice the first thing, return and submit to her into her hands. Tells him, go back, quit despising her, do what she tells you, and you're going to be okay. Second assurance he gives her, I will multiply your seed exceedingly, not numbered for multitude. Remember, we began, count the stars if you can, not numerable. This seed of Abram is going to be innumerable. Thirdly, he's going to be a son, and he's given instructions to call his name Ishmael. Lord has heard your affliction. This Ishmael is the father, is whom the Arabs came from. And there are a great number of them in the world, today. So all these things came to pass. And there's one more thing about this man, about Ishmael that this angel tells her, which again is Messiah. We'll show in a moment. We'll show right here. And as we continue on Genesis 16, 12 through 16. And he'll be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of his brethren. And he called the name of the Lord that spoke unto her. And she called the name of the Lord that spoke unto her, the God that sees me. For she says, I've also looked here after him. Have I also looked here after him that sees me? Therefore, the well was called Beer Lahorai. That, behold, is between Kadesh and Bered. In Arab, and Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bare Ishmael to Abram. Okay, so let's begin at the beginning here. About Ishmael. Notice he's going to be a wild man. And he's always going to be fighting with people around him. His fights, he's going to be a war. His fight's going to be, his existence is going to be a struggle, a fight. And he's going to dwell in the presence of all his brethren. We'll talk about who some of all these brethren are later. Right now, remember, he's the only one. He has no brothers. So notice brethren, plural, a foreshadowing here of things to come. That Abram is going to have. He's going to have brothers. He's going to live in them. And again, his descendants indeed occupy not just the Middle East, a large part of the Middle East, and even into Africa, and have spread out, parts of northern India, etc. And they're in that area called the Greater Middle East, where not just Ishmael lives, but also other people who are sometimes clumped as Arabs, but perhaps not. His descendants live as well, and he lives among them, and he lives there in that area. So that's but notice, but what's driving this fighting? Why will he be a wild man? Because it starts with how he came in, how he was even conceived. His conception, he's an outlier. Even though this perhaps happened to, this was not totally uncommon. It wasn't a normal way to come in. A man was supposed to go into his wife, and she have a son by him. Instead, you got this convoluted, complicated relationship now between Hagar and there's just not stability there. And that's why everything he's going to get, he's got to fight for it. He just doesn't going to have that stability, even though Abram's his father. And there's just no stability in his life. And this is not his fault. No one asked to be born. No one asked to be conceived. But nonetheless, the events have now been put into motion that this is going to be the end result. That He's going to be forced to, he's going to be forced to be on his own, take care of himself, and fight for everything he has. And we'll see this play out later in another lesson. But the circumstances have already put into play, the gun's been fired and the bullet cannot be taken back. Okay. So, and notice the Lord, God sees me. The name of the Lord had spoken to her. The name of the Lord had spoken to her. So the Lord spoken to her. That angel of the Lord was and remember, Yeshua said, no man has seen the Father except the Son. She has been talking to a pre-incarnate manifestation of Messiah. He was here before the world began. He was in the bosom of the Father. He's the Alpha and Omega, and he's manifested himself to her. And God, and there's an important lesson for all of you here. You may be suffering. You may things that were beyond your control. You like Hagar may feel like you've had no choice, and we're forced into something without really being consulted. But God sees you just like He saw her. He sees your circumstances. There may be things may be rough because of it, but God will still take care of you. And He'll take care of your children as well if you'll put your trust in Him like Hagar did. Notice Hagar puts her trust in the Lord. So now the Arabs have this claim of being the seed of Abraham. And, in a physical sense, they indeed are. But that's not the end of the story here. We continue on. Remember, brethren. Well, there's only one here. So we continue on in Genesis 17, verses 1 through 6. We read the following. When Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am the Lord God Almighty. Walk before me and be you perfect. I will make my covenant between me and you. He'll multiply you exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked to him, saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. Neither shall you no more be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for the far many nations I have made you. I'll make you exceeding fruitful, and I'll make nations of you, and kings shall come out of you. Okay, notice 99 years old. He was 85 when Sarah said, go into Hagar. It was 86. Ishmael's now 13 years old. Remember, 13 in the Bible is always associated with strife, rebellion, and trouble. Okay. And by the way, if you have teenagers at the time, your children become full of strife, trouble, and rebellion when they're 13. So he's going to be a father of many nations. God says, Mike, he's making a covenant with him. Now he already made a covenant with him earlier. We saw this. Okay, so this is like so this is another one. That first one was concerning a seed coming out of his own body. And the seed came out by having that land. Ishmael is now a candidate. But this is a different covenant here. To define that seed. We're going to take a look here. So he's going to make another covenant with Abraham here. And notice names his name from exalted father, which undoubtedly seemed like a cruel joke because Abram couldn't have children. But notice Abram had never went to anyone but Sarai. When he went to Hagar, children. I mean, right away, conception. Okay. Abram was never the problem here. So, but now he's going to many nations. Well, it doesn't specify how that's going to happen, but he's going to be a father of many nations. And we'll look and see how that plays out. And kings are going to come out of you. Well, that's that mean? Well, that could be a king of each of these nations, also a line of kings. So kings are going to come from Abraham. And he continues on with him about this covenant he's talking about, whereby not just he's going to have someone come out of his own body that we saw, it's going to give him this larger territory, not just the land of Canaan, which he originally was promised, when he's called out of Ur of the Chaldeans, but also, this larger area is going to for a seed as well. And I'll establish my covenant between me and your seed after you. And this is what we read in Genesis. We continue on Genesis 17, verses 7 through 9. And I will establish my covenant between me and your seed, and you and your seed after you, and your generation for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto you, and to your seed after you. And I'll give unto you and to your seed after you the land wherein you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my covenant therefore you and your seed after you in their generations. Okay, first of all, this covenant's everlasting. And why is it required for God to be God unto them? Well, if God's gonna be their God, that means they have to obey him. Right away, we see a condition here. And their seed is gonna have to obey him. You're going to recognize he's God, they're not. And what land? All that land between the river of Egypt and the Euphrates that we talked about earlier, in that covenant God assured. No, the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, which in practical terms today is perhaps part of Lebanon, of southern Lebanon, modern day Israel, and the West Bank. The Philistines, Palestinians, same word as Philistines, literally means invaders, and they took that area of Gaza Strip and a little bit up to Ashkelon, which is in Israel today. So it could be at this time of Abraham, it didn't even include that piece of land. So this is about the land of Canaan, not the entire promised land. That's worth noting. And this covenant is about that land of Canaan. Remember, Abraham's going to be father of many nations, but which one of those is going to get the land of Canaan is what this particular covenant's about. Now we get into the conditions. Now we get into the covenant itself in Genesis 17, 10 through 14. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your seed after you. Every man child among you shall be circumcised, and he shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin. It shall be a token of the covenant betwixt you and me and you. He that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you. Every man in your generations, he that is born in the house or brought with money of any stranger which is not of your seed. He that is born in your house and he is bought with money must needs be circumcised. My covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised child whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that so shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Okay, so this is the covenant. The covenant is circumcision. And it's the sign that you are that group that has this right to be in the land of Canaan. Again, not the entire promised land we talked about, but the land of Canaan in particular is what this covenant's about. that was that covenant. That promise concerning the whole of the promised land was 13 years earlier than this. And so notice you've got to be circumcised to show you have a right to be in that land. The covenant is in the flesh for everlasting. This is like instead of writing, someone writing someone's name with an ink pen on their arm or something, having it tattooed on their arm. I mean, the idea is it's lasting. It's lifelong. Circumcised means to cut around. So what's the deal with this? The seed of Abraham, a man's seed, is circumcised in the foreskin, the flesh of his foreskin. That wrapper that's around a man's begetter, thing he uses to beget children with. When that's cut off, now the sign of the covenant, the seed must pass through the sign of the covenant every time he creates children. Every time he goes into a woman and she conceives, the seed had to pass through the sign of the covenant. So that seed at conception is marked as being part of the covenant. The individual is. Now cut off his people can mean two things. Can mean death. In some cases it does. We've shown that. But it can also just mean banishment. Excision. Excision is similar to excommunication. You're not killed, but you're no longer counted as part of that people. You're cut off from that people. Okay. So you don't have a right to the promised land unless you've done this. And notice it's not just his physical seeds, not just his descendants, but also those who are part of his household. So anyone that's in the household of Abraham has to be circumcised. In the household is not just is physical descendants plus those others bought with money. Bought with money speaks of what? Being redeemed. They were someone else's slave, or what? Now they've been brought into the household of Abraham. They've been redeemed. So they've been grafted in. They become part of the house of Abraham, the household. They've been grafted into the household of Abraham as well. And they have to have this mark, because this mark is what shows you have a right to live in the promised land. Without it, you don't have any guaranteed right at all. You might. Another place talks about people who are foreigners just passing through, or laborers, whatever, live among them and do jobs for them and whatever. But they're not part of the household. Only the household has a right. The rest are there at the discretion of the household. They can tell them to leave, and they have to leave. Okay. A lot. So there's no. So the household has the stability. The rest don't. Now we continue on in Genesis 15, in 17. I'm sorry, in verse 15 through 18. And there's some more now that this covenant. Now the condition of this covenant has been given. There's more news here for Abraham. And God said to Abraham, "For Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I'll bless her and give you a son also of her. Yea, I'll bless her, and she'll be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her." And Abraham fell upon his face and laughed and said in his heart, "Shall a child be born if he's 100 years old? And shall Sarai, that is 90 years old, bear?" There said to God, "Oh, Ishmael might live before you." Okay, Sarai means contentious. Sarah means princess. God is saying your wife's gonna go from contentious to princess. Stop calling her contentious. This is probably why he had to marry his half sister. She, we saw before, she's good looking, but people were like, sure, I want to go into her, but I don't want to marry her. I don't want to have someone contentious who's never happy and live with them the rest of my life. But notice Sarai's behavior hasn't changed, but Abraham is now to call her princess nonetheless. First thing is quit calling contentious contentious. Start calling her princess. Because God's going to bless her. And a princess is someone, speaks of royalty, right? And she's also going to have a son. Kings of nations are going to come out of her. She's going to be a mother of nations. Notice nations, plural, multiple ethnic groups, okay, are going to be of her. And Abraham here is laughing, but he's not laughing in unbelief like we'll see Sarai does in our next lesson. But he's laughing in joy and amazement. And notice a child born to him 100 years old. Now, Abram, as we discussed, his father died when he was 205, and Abram was 75, went in the land. So Abram was born when his father was 130. Okay. And we're told in Acts he didn't, he stayed in Quran till his father died. So we know, but the whittling's been going on. But Abram's nowhere near, nowhere near that point where he can't have children anymore. But Sarah has been barren her whole life. She's went through menopause, except. And now he's laughing because it just seems funny to him. He's not laughing like, you're being ridiculous, Lord. He's just laughing that God waited this long. He waits in these conditions. And he brings up this subject of Ishmael to him. Ishmael's 13. He's there in that stage, that stage of rebellion, trouble, and strife. And he wants Ishmael to live before God, to be blessed as well, to be blessed. And now we're going to look at God's response to that in Genesis 17, verses 19 to 22. And God said, Sarah, your wife, shall have a son, shall bear you a son indeed, shall call his name Isaac, and I'll establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant with his seed after him. As for Ishmael, I heard you. Behold, I blessed him and will make him fruitful, multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I'll make him a great nation. But my covenant I'll establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto you at this set time in the next year. He left off talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. So she's going to name him Isaac, which means laughter. Because that's because she laughed. Well, actually, God said this before she ever heard, ever laughed. Remember, Abraham laughed, but not in unbelief. Abraham laughed because he found it fun, the way the Lord was doing things just funny. It's outside the norm. And he asked about this Ishmael. Ishmael has a natural birth. There's nothing supernatural about his birth, but because he is the seed of Abraham, his natural seed, through natural means, he's going to be blessed. He's going to be great. 12 princes are going to come out of him. That's 12 ethnic groups, okay? There, in the day, again, there are these sub-ethnic groups among Arabs, different types of Arabs. But the covenant's going to be established with Isaac, that Sarah's going to bear. So not just through the body of Abraham, but also the body of his wife. And God has waited so it can be a supernatural birth. And so it is with us. We see in the words of Shaul, the Apostle Paul, here in Romans 9, 8 through 9. That as they which are the seed of Abraham, but as which they're the seed of the flesh, are not the children of God. The children of promise is counted for the seed. For this is the word of promise. For at this time I will come, and Sarah will have a son. So, the children of promise are counted for the seed. The seed of Abraham is not just natural. it's supernatural. And that promise is a promise of a supernatural birth. And so that speaks to us. It doesn't matter. People are like, oh, well, I'm from Ishmael. I'm an Arab. I'm the seed of Abraham through natural means. Even I'm the seed of Abraham through Isaac, who we're talking about. Isaac has supernatural birth, but you didn't. We all become the children of God, must have a supernatural birth. Just like the seed of Abraham that he would use to bless all people with had to have a supernatural birth. So we cannot be just the children of the flesh having natural birth. We must also be born again, have a supernatural birth as well. Now in Genesis 17 verses 23 through 27, we continue on, and we're going to look at Abraham's response to this. Because remember, he has to do something. He has to do the circumcision business. And Abraham took Ishmael, his son, and all that were in his house, and all that were bought with money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day, as God had said unto him. And Abraham was 99 years old, and when he was circumcised the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he circumcised the flesh of his foreskin. In the same day was Abraham circumcised, and Ishmael, his son. And all the men of his house, born in the house, bought with money of the stranger, were circumcised with him. So Abraham goes on through it. And what can I say about this except, ouch. That 8th day we talked about earlier. So the thing on the 8th day is physiologically, it's the optimum time to be circumcised. Vitamin K levels for a man are the highest point they're ever going to be his entire life on the 8th day, which helps with blood clotting. The nerve endings have not really developed around in the area of the foreskin. In fact, I watched a video online of someone circumcising an 8-day baby boy, and the baby didn't even cry. However, different when you're 13, you've gone through puberty, and those nerve endings are perhaps, if not their peak, are definitely well developed. 99, and Abraham's still not done begetting here. Okay, he's got to beget Isaac, for example. Abraham's nerve endings are still working quite well. So these adult men. And they're all going to be circumcised now. And the thing is, we see other places. I could have went into a lot more about this, but we got more important things to talk about. But just to give you, we talked about this in the previous when we shown usually a fever sets in, and people are incapacitated for about 3 days when they do this as an adult. Remember, there's no antibiotics or anything back in the day, right? And it definitely leaves a mark, which is the point, of course, huh? And that's what they're doing. And now today, Arabs and Muslims still circumcise their children, their sons, when they're 13 years old, because Ishmael was. Now, unlike the circumcision of this Jewish baby I saw circumcised at 8 days, the kid didn't cry. I saw a picture of some kids, apparently a clinic of some sort of thing or something, sitting in seats, 13-year-old boys, waiting their turns, looking very worried and concerned. They undoubtedly can hear screaming going on, from the people in front of them about being circumcised. And also, I want to bring this out to you. I want to stress this. Ishmael, his son. Ishmael was not the son of promise, but he never stopped being the son of Abraham. He was not a supernatural seed through a supernatural birth like Isaac, but he was still the natural seed of Abraham. And remember, we've seen God has promised blessing upon Ishmael as well. And don't be mistreating the Arabs, because those who curse Abraham are cursed. That would include Ishmael. Don't be out there, if you're in an oil deal with him or something, trying to cheat him out of money or something. Because they are the seed of Abraham. In this very physical sense. If we're given all these promises concerning them that God brought to pass. So do not be looking down upon them as if they're somehow, nothing or worse than nothing. They are indeed the seed of Abraham, just not the supernatural seed of Abraham, not the ones that were given the promise for the land of Canaan. Now, we continue on in Rome. Remember that promise we saw in the phrase, the river Egypt was to all the seed of Abraham. Now, we continue on, and that's where we're going to drop. That's where we're stopping in just. We're going to talk about this circumcision business and getting this straight, because it's so important to understanding the seed of Abraham, and what that means and how it applies. As we've already shown, it's multiple. It is Messiah. It's a natural seed and a supernatural seed. And we just looked at this natural seed has two phases, two parts. Ishmael and Isaac so far, okay? And Isaac's the one, the promise is, his seeds, he's that seed the promise is given through to give the land of Canaan to. But what about, there's a supernatural seed too. And what's the relationship between them and these others? Well, we're going to take a look at this right now. I mean, what about believers who maybe are not physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? It's possible people are and don't know it because their ancestor moved from one place to another, changed their name, didn't tell anyone, married someone, never told anyone, died. Their descendants don't know this has happened. People have found it out thanks to DNA testing, later. But they were, but the truth is their father was, and whatever their father just didn't know it. But what if you're just not? It doesn't matter. And that's what Shaul is going to tell us here in Romans 4:9-13. Comes this blessing, this blessedness upon the circumcision only, or upon the uncircumcision also? For we say that faith was reckoned to Abraham for righteousness. How then was it reckoned? When he was in circumcision or in uncircumcision? Not in circumcision, but in uncircumcision. He received the sign of circumcision, a seal of the righteousness of faith which he had, yet being uncircumcised. You have the father of all them that believe, that they be not circumcised, that righteousness might be imputed to them for also. And the fire of circumcision, them that are not of the circumcision only, but who also walk in the steps of the faith that our father Abraham, which he had, yet being uncircumcised. For the promise should be the heir of the world was not to Abraham or to his seed through the law, but to the righteousness of faith. Okay. So circumcision only purpose was to show the faith Abraham already had before he was circumcised. If he didn't have faith in God's promise to give Isaac, that one that's going to be born to Sarah, the land of Canaan, he wouldn't have went through the pain. He wouldn't put Ishmael through the pain. He wouldn't put the rest of the men of his house through the pain. Going through the pain was the proof he had the faith he had before he went through the pain. It was his faith that made him righteous, believing that God would bring about what he said. And so it is for us. Circumcision does not save anyone. It's faith in what God said that leads to action. I mean, that's what faith is, confidence that leads to action. Confidence in what God said that leads to action that brings people salvation. In this case, the action was getting circumcised. But the circumcision did not save him at all. It was the faith he had that caused him to get circumcised that actually caused him to be counted as righteous. Continue that being counted righteous. Remember, 13 years went by since he originally said he was counted for him as righteousness. But now we see a continual walking in that righteousness, that seal of the righteousness of faith. He continued in faith. But circumcision never saved anyone. It never made one person righteous. And in Galatians 3, verses 20 through 29, read the following. There's neither Jew nor Greek. There's neither bond nor free. There's neither male nor female. You are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you be Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. Well, when it says Greek there, it means Gentile. It's really referring to anyone we saw earlier that's not circumcised. Okay? If you're not circumcised, it doesn't matter if you're circumcised or not. It doesn't matter if you're bond or free. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. All get the same benefits of righteousness in Messiah. In other words, if you be Christ, then you're Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. And we showed this a while back where one of the prophets spoke of Messiah, be counted as the generation Messiah. When we are born again, we're counted as the seed of Messiah. If Christ is Abraham's seed, then those are born to him are also Abraham's seed. We're born again as the seed of Christ. We are born again as the seed of Abraham. And we also are heirs according to the promise. Now, what are we heirs of? Are we heirs to the promised land, the area between Euphrates and the river of Egypt, Mediterranean, etc.? Are we heirs to the land of Canaan? No, we are that seed that we started with. It's like the stars of heaven. Our inheritance is not this on this earth. It's heavenly. It's spiritual. Yeah, and it means we will reign on this earth with Messiah at where he assigns us to. But our treasures are in heaven. Our inheritance is in heaven. We are that heavenly seed that we began with, that was promised would come through the seed of Abraham, that multitude. Those of us who believe and made righteous because we believe God, we've made Messiah Lord of our life, put him in charge of everything because we believe God raised from the dead, are that supernatural seed of Abraham we began with. Now, but what about the natural seed? In particular, we're talking about the Jews here. We're kind of already talked about Ishmael, but what about those that come through? They're going to come through Isaac later. The Jews, using that term broadly again, meaning the sins of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and also really their household, those who became part of them through circumcision. Well, Yeshua addresses that. Because what we're looking at here is there's this teaching called dual covenant theology that basically I've had people tell me, you don't need to tell. Hey, you should have told him about Jesus. He's Jewish. Jews don't need that. They got a separate deal through Abraham with God. Well, let's see what Yeshua says about this ideal of this. Because they're trying to make it all natural. It's about the flesh, but you're about the flesh, not the spirit. Let's just see what Yeshua has to say. And they answered him here again, John 8, verse 33 to 39. Answered him, we be Abraham's seed, and never were in bondage to any man. How say you shall be made free? And Jesus answered them, saying, verily, verily, I say unto you, whoso commits sin is the servant of sin. The servant abides not in the house forever, but the Son abides forever. And the Son, therefore, shall make you free. You shall be free indeed. I know that you are Abraham's seed, but you shall seek to kill me. Because you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. I speak that which I have seen with my father. You do that which you have seen with your father. Then answered them, Abraham is our father. And Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, then you would do the works of Abraham. Okay, notice they say they're the seed of Abraham, and they're talking a total natural sense through Isaac. And Yeshua, Jesus confirms it with them. Yep, that's true, but they're not his children, because the children do what the father tells them to. They do the same thing as the father. If you've seen the father, you've seen this. I mean, if you've seen the son, you've seen the father, as Yeshua says in another place. And they're not doing what Abraham did. And this is that passage I referred to earlier. If you look at it all, where they said, he saw Abraham. Well, we looked at where he saw Abraham. But they're not doing this. They're not doing the works of Abraham. And I'm going to give you an example. When I first got saved, I got saved through unusual circumstances, shall I say, not the standard going down to church and an altar, so on and so forth. And I started reading the New Testament, and I read this, and later I read in Hebrews, Abraham paid tithes. I started paying tithes. No one told me to. But the children of Abraham do what Abraham did. And the children of Abraham, as we saw, the seed of Messiah is the seed of Abraham. Therefore, if Abraham paid tithes, so was I supposed to. I don't know God promised me anything for it. I didn't know anything other than that, but I acted on it, because that's what faith does. Faith acts on the word of God. And no one who knows these things I just said and doesn't pay tithes is acting in faith. You simply do not trust God with your money. You can try to paint it however you want, spin it however you want, but that's the bottom line. You just simply do not trust God with your money, and therefore you're not acting in faith. You're not obedient to God. And that's the situation these people were in. And except in their case, they were paying tithes. They just weren't doing other things that Abraham would have done. Abraham was a friend of Messiah, and they're trying to kill him, for example. So the children of Abraham are those who do what Abraham did. And Shaul confirms and expounds upon it here in Romans 4, verse 16 through 18. Wherefore it is of faith that it might be by grace, to the end the promise be made sure to all the seed, not only that which is the law, but also which is the faith of Abraham, who is father of us all. As I've written to you, I have made you a father of many nations, before him whom he believed, even God who quickens the dead and calls those things which are not as if they were, be as though as they were. Who against hope believed in hope, they might be the father of many nations. According to that which was spoken, so shall your seed be. You notice the hope, the faith. This faith is believing the promises of God. And if we have faith, it will always result in action. It's confidence that leads to action. If the actions do not occur, the confidence is not really there. It's not just you saying it with your mouth. It's you doing it. It's not just talking the talk. It's walking the talk. Or prefer to say it, walking the walk. It's both. That's this faith of Abraham. He just didn't hear it and mentally assent. He believed it. He laughed in belief, as I said earlier. He had confidence God was going to do this. He just thought it was funny about how God was going about it. They had waited so long, except. And so shall your seed be. Those of us who are the seed of Abraham, I know about that heavenly seed, not that earthly seed, the sands of the sea, that heavenly seed, the stars of the sky, also are those of us who live in faith in the word of God, that we don't just speak it with our mouths, but we perform it with our actions. And we in Romans 9, 6 through 7, Shaul kind of summarizes this here for us. Not as though the word of God had taken an effect, but they are not all Israel which are of Israel. Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they called all children. But Isaac shall your seed be called. The word of God, is not ever been impotent. Okay, not everyone these, not all, not everyone, not they're not all Israel, which are of Israel. Those those are the physical descendants of Israel are not necessarily the seed of Abraham, or just because, or the children or his children, the children of Abraham. You know, like that song, Father Abraham. Okay, so on and so forth. They're not. They're not his children just because they're physical. A natural birth is not sufficient. The seed, in this sense, here we're talking about here, is just a natural birth. Isaac didn't have a supernatural birth. They didn't. It's only those who have that supernatural birth, like Isaac, that are the children of Abraham. So the stars of heaven speak of the spiritual children of Abraham, the supernatural children of Abraham. And because of this, you've had various groups like the Crusaders claim, well, we're the seed of Abraham. Therefore, the promised land, particularly the land of Canaan, belongs to us. And so the Crusades come along. And the kingdom of Jerusalem. And they fight to take this from the sons of Ishmael, who claimed it because they were the seed of Abraham. The original the seed in natural means only. And they say, well, no, the Jews, don't have that supernatural birth. They're not the seed we are. The Crusaders take it from the seeds of Ishmael, the sons of Ishmael. So they're fighting back and forth over this land of Canaan, particularly, because they both claim to be the seed of Abraham. But remember, that seed of Abraham to whom that promise was given concerning the land of Canaan was Isaac and his natural seed. But this brings up this question. What about them? Because on the other extreme from what I talked to, it's called dual covenant theology earlier, of Jews don't need Jesus to be saved. They got their own deal. Their sins of Abraham, they got an automatic in. Their sins of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they got an automatic in. It's not true. Well, the other one is replacement theology, and that's what it's called. That's what we're talking about here with the Crusaders. We've replaced them, and therefore those promises concerning the earth, like these earthly things, belong to us. The land of Canaan is earthly. It is on the earth without contradiction. So, but let's see what the word of God says about this. Has the fact that this supernatural seed, this heavenly seed, done away with and supplanted the promises given to the earthly seed? The sands of the seashore. Let's take a look. In Jeremiah 33, verse 22 through 26, we read the following. As the host of heaven cannot be numbered, the sand of the sea measured, so multiply seed of David my servant, and the Levites that minister unto me. Moreover, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, saying, consider you not this people have spoken, saying, the two families the Lord has chosen, has even cast them off. Thus they have despised my people, that they should no more be a nation before them. Thus says the Lord, if my covenant with day and night if my covenant be not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the orders of heaven and earth, then I'll cast away the seed of Jacob and David my servant. So I'll also take away any of his seed to be rulers over the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For I'll cause their captivity to return and have mercy on them. Okay, so this is exactly what Jeremiah is addressing here. Notice a two-part seed of David. Messiah came through David. He's the son of David, the son of Abraham. That's how Matthew 1:1 starts, okay? and the Levites, again, the Levites who take care of the temple, etc. And so the seed of David is going to be mentioned through Messiah. Okay, but that's it. But there's also that seed through the sand of the seashore. David needs people to rule over. His seed is going to be rulers over the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, where are they going to rule at? In the land promised. The throne of David is given the throne in Jerusalem. And so it's certain that this, and those who despise his people, notice he's calling the people of Israel, even though they're total rebellion here. That's why Jeremiah sent to him. Tell them the Babylonians are coming, you rebelled against the Lord and judgment's coming, and it's certain. Best thing you can do is just surrender to the Babylonians when they show up, etc. But they're still his people. They didn't quit being his people, and these other people despised him and didn't want them to be a nation no more, who claimed to be the seed of Abraham, the physical, natural seed who has that right to the promised land. God said, if day and night cease, heaven and earth cease, then so also will these things. Will that covenant I made concerning them cease? They're going to return, and he's going to have mercy on them. And that restoration of Israel I have talked about is going to occur. So God in no way replaced them in his plan with, using the term very broadly, church or the Christians. Okay? The inheritance of the Christian is heavenly. It's supernatural. Theirs is natural. It's earthly. And one has not replaced the other, nor were they, and when this brings up a question sometimes, well, then what, a question that might come to mind, well, which group is someone in? Well, we're going to look at this here in Romans 11, 1 through 6, verses 1 through 6. Shaul, the apostle Paul, is going to confirm what I just said. I say then, has God cast away his people? God forbid. For I am an Israelite, the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not cast away his people which he foreknew. No, you know what the scripture says of Elias? How he makes intercession to God against Israel, saying, Lord, they have killed your prophets and dig down your altars, and I am left alone, and they seek my God, and they seek my life. Well, what says the answer of God to him? I have reserved to myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to the image of Baal. And I will this present time also, even so this present time also, there's a remnant according to the election of grace. If by grace, it is no more of works. Otherwise, grace is no more grace. But if it be works, there's no more grace. Otherwise, work is no more work. In the grace of God, God did not owe us an opportunity to repent and come into faith and be saved. That was 100% his grace. And in the same way, he's not abandoned Israel. There's always been a remnant. Paul gives himself an example. Paul's talking about his physical physically, according to his flesh, he's an Israelite, the seed of Abraham, the tribe of Benjamin. He stresses that tribe that clung to Judah when 10 of them left off to make the northern kingdom of Israel. He is a Jew's Jew, okay? And he's not the only one. Just in Elijah's day, Elijah wasn't the only one left serving God. A remnant of the natural seed of Abraham were also through Isaac. Were also the supernatural seed of Abraham through faith. And Paul himself being an example of this. And there's always been a remnant. In fact, Israel, the promised land, has never been totally devoid of a Jewish presence. There's always been a remnant left there as a witness of God's faithfulness. of those words we read in Jeremiah. He's always left some there. Not because they deserve it, but because of his grace and his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we can see here, Paul's saying what Jeremiah said, flat out, no, they've not been replaced. No, God has not forsaken them. He's not cast them away. He's not been like, whoops, I screwed up with them. They're gone. I mean, what an insult to God when you think about it. And Paul ends with, we're going to end with these words of Shaul, the Apostle Paul, to give us clarity about the seed of Abraham and really our attitude towards it, what it should be. That which I speak it not, 2 Corinthians 11, verse 17 through 22. That which I speak it not to the Lord, which as it were, foolishly, in this confidence of boasting, so that may see that may glory after the flesh, I will glory also. As you suffer fools gladly, seeing yourselves, for you suffer your fools gladly, seeing yourselves as are wise. For you suffer a man bring you into bondage, or a man devour you, take of you, man exalt himself, a man smite you on the face. I speak concerning reproach, though we have been weak. Howbeit, wheresoever any is bold, I speak foolishly, I am bold also. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? So am I. Okay. Shaul, the Apostle Paul, is the seed of Abraham, naturally and supernaturally. Now we're looking at another problem. Another problem. This is not like the replacement theology we was talking about earlier, but this is this mindset that exists among believers that he's addressing. Remember, I mentioned before, historically, this time, Corinth, the city, was 50% Jewish and 50% Gentile. Okay. And the Jewish people have the Jewish believers have the superiority complex over the Gentiles, that they are somehow better because they're glorying after the flesh. Their ancestry makes them somehow better than the Gentiles. And Paul says Shaul, the Apostle Paul, says it is absolute foolishness to do so. God is no respecter. We're told the Torah, he does not regard any man. In Acts, Peter finally gets it. Well, when God gives him a vision, even despite the fact he's been with Yeshua and Yeshua demonstrate, he finally gets it. And it's in the Torah, as we said, that God is no respecter of persons. God accepts everyone who will walk in his ways, accepts him and walk in his ways, and rejects everyone who rejects him and refuses to walk in his ways. Whether or not you are part of the earthly seed of Israel has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not you're part of that of the heavenly seed of Israel. So the seed of Abraham can be thought of in a four-part way. You have Ishmael and others to come. We'll talk about later. But Ishmael and those aligned with him, the Arabs today, who not all, but by and large, but many of them are Muslims. They're not believers in Messiah, but some are. But we're talking about the ones who aren't. And God's promised to bless them. He gave a promise to Abraham. And he calls him his seed, Abraham's seed. And if you curse them, you're going to be cursed. And you bless them, you're going to be blessed. He has the descendants of Isaac. Then later Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But Isaac, and that's seed of Abraham. The seed, that supernatural seed that's given, as promised, the land of Canaan, out of that larger area of the promised land we looked at. And if history only has one lesson, it's this: don't screw with the Jews. Because that blessing of God blessing you and cursing those, blessing those that bless them and curse them, is very demonstrable in history. And that's the natural seed. But there's a supernatural seed. That seed, first of all, starting with Messiah, born of a virgin, a supernatural birth just like Isaac. And he had no physical seed, never married, never went into a woman, never had anyone, no way to conceive. But he's counted as a generation. What? Those who also have a supernatural birth like him are counted as his seed. And so therefore, they are also the seed of Abraham. But just like the seeds of Ishmael and the seeds of Isaac, who are the seed of Abraham, both seed of Abraham, are given different promises for different things. So also the supernatural seed of Abraham is given a different set of promises as well through the seed of Abraham that ties it all together, that's going to bring peace to all of them. Yeshua, Jesus, Mashiach, Messiah, because he is the seed of Abraham, the one that matters most. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.